Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy, and I am a very grateful alcoholic. It's absolutely amazing to me to be here, to be anywhere sober. If someone had told me when I first came into the program, imagine this, how you felt when you first walked into the program. If somebody had said, hey, look, in about a little over 10 years from now, somebody's going to call you up and they're going to offer to fly you out hundreds of miles, pay for your dinner, and ask you to share this misery, I would have said, what drugs are you on? I mean, come on, what is this? But it's true, and it's what's happened. And I was in my room last night with a view of the lake, and as I said to Marjorie earlier, it's just amazing to me that no matter what part of the world I go to in Alcoholics Anonymous, when I see these little tags, we're family. It doesn't matter whether I got sober in California, I live in New Mexico now, and I'm standing in Lake Charles, where I've never been before in my life, sober, and it's just amazing to me. And I would very much like to thank the committee for your hospitality and for asking me to join you out here. I learned a long time ago, I would love to tell you that after all these years, it's nothing to speak. It still makes me anxious. My sponsor told me I got nervousness confused with excitement. So I'm really excited this morning. But I had a woman early on in the program with a lot of sobriety once when I had to speak. You know how that is. At a rather large meeting in San Francisco, and I was complaining how nervous I was, how terrible thing that had happened to me having to speak. And she said, you know, basically, grow up. You know, this is an honor. It's an honor to be asked to speak in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the point to that story that I told before, too, of how I felt when I first came in, that anybody would ever want me to come and share, let alone fly me out. People were asking me, throwing me out of their house, not asking me to come in. The fact that somebody would do that reminds me of that line in the Big Book somewhere that says, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And for me, that has included my sober experiences, everything that happens to me in Alcoholics Anonymous and before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And even, especially, I guess, the experiences where I've had painful times in sobriety. And I thought, that how can any of this come to be of any good, you know? And somewhere in that prayer, it says that God take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that I serve. And it is so exciting to me when I've come through some kind of let's face it, I had this great misconception that if I got sober and was a good little AA, I would not get the common cold, parking tickets, have employment trouble, or relationship problems. I mean, come on, you know? I'd never have financial, I heard someone at a meeting once say, what we get when we come to Alcoholics Anonymous is an opportunity to show up for life, which includes parking tickets, relationship problems, financial. So, and that was a great disappointment to me, but today it's not. And when I've come through the other side of that, as a result of these steps, as a result of this program, and then somebody calls me in the middle of the night and says, I'm dying from a relationship problem or an employment problem, and I can say, hey, me too, how exciting, and to be able to share that with somebody. I also think it's really amazing that this committee, as God works in mysterious ways, I don't know if you've ever been sitting around your house just pondering over some big, terrible problem, like where to hang a picture or something, and fighting about that with somebody. And the phone rings, and you hear this voice say, hi, Nancy, this is Bill Wilson. Oh, my God. I'm sure you get ripped about this a lot, but I thought I had a real spiritual awakening, you know. Nobody's going to believe this. He said, we'd like for you to come speak. I said, okay. When Bill Wilson asked you to speak, you go. I thought, this is going to be it kind of reminds me of that joke, you know, there's a baseball in heaven. The bad news is you're pitching. You know? I thought, there? You want me to go there and speak? Okay, I wasn't quite ready for that, but anyway, I'm honored, and I especially am honored to be asked to speak by Bill Wilson and Bill W. This is an anonymous fellowship. I've come to share my experience, strength, and hope with you, and I hope that I spend more time on my hope than I do what it was like, because what it was like is not nearly as exciting as what it has been like. I also very much like your custom in the South, which we didn't have in California where I got sober, which is probably why I shouldn't say this, but so many people talk about they've been around the program, you know, in the program, around the program, through the program. Yeah, I've been around the program for about 75 years. When was your last drink? 75, minutes ago, but but here you guys cut right through that stuff, and I kind of like that because then you don't have to guess, I had recently an experience of asking somebody to be my sponsor. The guy sounded so spiritual, I couldn't believe it, I thought, hey, he says he's got 27 years in the program. This is a new town I'm living in, and found out the guy smokes dope, and I thought, there was a part of me, we had lunch about 2 or 3 times, and I thought, either this guy is so spiritual I can't relate, or he's full of shit. I couldn't tell. I just couldn't tell. Anyway, it was kind of embarrassing. I think it's kind of fair for everybody to say this is what's really happening, you know. So I would like to do that, even though it's not our custom, and tell you that by the grace of God in this fellowship, and I don't know what else, I have been blessed with sobriety, and in my last drug altering my state of mind was on July 26th of 1975, and I'm very, very grateful for that. It's a miracle, one day at a time. Cuts right through it. Anyway, I have come to share with you a little bit about what it's been like and for me in sobriety, and I hope that you get something out of that this morning. I prayed before I came to speak, trying to remember that I wasn't asked to come out here to entertain you, that I was asked to come out here to share with you what it's been like for me, and that's where it all began. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous because I had no place else to go. I've heard a lot of people talk. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous 2 years before I was legally of age to drink. I never had a legal drink in my life, so if you think you're too young, think again. I couldn't, and I often hear people say it would have been so wonderful if I had gotten there when you got there, and for me, and I don't know how old you are when you get here, I don't think it really matters. I don't think I would have lived to 21. I just don't. I mean, you know, it wasn't in the cards. When I got here just when I did. And I watch a lot of people who don't make it here. It's certainly not a program for those who need it. I mean, I don't know, if you stay around here long enough, you'll bury a few people in Alcoholics Anonymous who didn't need AA. And I just, again, as somebody when I was talking before the meeting, it's a mystery to me. It's a blessing why we were chosen, why I'm here. I did not get myself sober. I did not wake up one sunny morning and say, you know, pull the blinds and say, man, it's beautiful. I think I'll go see the people in AA are doing. You know, I'd like to find God and work the steps. I mean, come on. I came here because there was no place else to go for me, and coming to Alcoholics Anonymous for me was a bit like being sentenced to South Africa to be a nun. If that's your goal in life, please don't be offended. It was not one of mine. It didn't sound fun. I thought the flies were big there, and it was hot, and there would be no romance for certain, and I would never smile or have joy in my life. And to me, that was what AA was. You know, it was the very worst thing that I could possibly imagine happening in my life, which is, I think, kind of a spiritual principle for me, because the very worst thing that I thought could possibly happen to me in my life was not death. It was not even an institution. It was Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought that was the worst thing that can happen. Turned out to be the biggest blessing in my life. And I remember that today when I'm going through sober experiences, and I think, oh, this has just got to be hard. And I think, no, everything's a blessing. I heard a man at a conference not too long ago. He spoke at the International Young People's Conference in Denver this last year. And he said something that I just really loved. He had asked a rabbi to tell him about what a blessing was. And I just steal his line, but I think it's so wonderful because it's true. Blessings have not always smiled on me and tapped me on the shoulder and kissed me on the cheek, you know. A blessing, he said, was anything that pulled you, shoved you, pushed you, dragged you forward on your path. And that, I just thought, wow, it's beautiful. You know, it makes those dark times for me seem a lot better. Sometimes I have to be pushed, pulled, dragged, shoved on my spiritual path. I don't always skip along willingly. Kind of like coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was born and raised in the town of Fresno, which I was talking with our Sunday morning speaker. It's so wonderful to meet somebody who's been there, because, you know, you said, where are you from? Fresno. And he said, I'm sorry. And that's how I felt about it. I thought that's why I drank. I thought it was that town. It was terrible. It was hot and awful. And we were also talking about how it's always out there. You know, my drinking was always because, and Eve talked about it last night, that she had her mother had died, and God, but now here I'm 24 years old, and that was 12 years ago or whatever, and I'm the same way. I had a dead brother and a drunk mother, and I had thousands of reasons why I drank, and there are thousands of people out there that will encourage you if you've got a lot of problems. And I am eternally grateful for the program of Al-Anon, because recovering Al-Anons were very instrumental in getting me to this fellowship, because they were the first people I had ever encountered in my whole life when I told them about my dead brother and my drunk mother and the town of Fresno, that didn't say, oh, wow, I'm sorry, maybe you should, no wonder, poor kid, you better have another double, you know. They said, we think you are suffering from a disease. It's called alcoholism. If you'd like help, here's a telephone number. I hated him. So did you hear the part about my dead brother, you know? Yeah, we heard about that, but that has nothing to do with your disease. It's called alcoholism. There's a telephone number if you'd like it. I thought, who are these people? I hate them. They saved my life, I think, or were very instrumental. God works through people, and there are no mistakes. There are no coincidences in my life at all, and you will probably come to find that out through my story, and probably in your own life, you know, hopefully. I started drinking at a very early age. My mother is an alcoholic by her own admission, and she's still drinking, by as far as I know, and she's still alive. I don't understand it, you know. They say that God takes care of alcoholics and babies. I don't know if that's true or not, but she drank when I was young, and I don't know. I don't blame her for my alcoholism. I don't know whether it's hereditary. That's one of the things that always baffled me when I first came to AA, being the intellectual type. You know, I thought, I ran to the library and checked out all this literature on it. You know, I thought, okay, I've got alcoholism. I'm going to read up on it. This is how insane I was. I mean, people were talking about Alcoholics Anonymous to me, and I had never heard of AA. I heard of it. I didn't know what it was about. But again, I placed it in the same category as being sentenced to Africa to be a nun. But I went to the library and I looked up all this stuff on alcohol, checked it all out, you know, research, you understand. And they had a paper there, I don't know what you call it, a report, this was back in '75, talking about new cures for alcoholism. And they had one, this is the level of my insanity, where they were going to teach alcoholics to drink socially. And you know how they did it? They put electrodes underneath their fingernails. And they put them in a bar setting with social drinkers, and they were supposed to learn to drink like the social drinkers, and if they started to gulp, they got shot under the fingernails. I thought, that sounds all right. I would rather do that than come to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. I did not, but I mean, that's the level of insanity, you know. Okay, I'll learn to, shock treatment, sounds good to me. Learn to social, who wants to social drink? I don't understand social drinking. Social drinkers to me are cunning, baffling, and powerful. I don't care what anybody says. Have you ever lived with one? You go to a party and somebody says, would you like a cocktail? And they say, no thank you, I'm not thirsty. What the hell does being thirsty have to do with drinking, you know? Or they leave a half of a something or other on the, I just don't understand. They're a waste of time, social drinkers. Why drinks? I have never been a social drinker. If that's your experience, please come to another meeting, because you can be an alcoholic who's gone through a period of social drinking. I was not a social drinker. I drank from the very beginning to get drunk, to get out. And I don't understand. That's a lie. I had 2 days of social drinking, most miserable 2 days in my entire life, to make a point, to prove it, as you did, running down the street to get that drink. I bet it was the most miserable drink of your life. It was mine. But I was making a point. I had gone to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I understand this is Alcoholics Anonymous, this is not Narcotics Anonymous. Part of my story includes other drugs, although alcohol was always my drug of choice. But if you're contemplating this, again, maybe my experience, strength, and hope will save you something you don't have to go through. Maybe it won't. But after my first meeting, I don't remember much about what was said. And also I hear people say they went to their first meeting and they walked in and all the people were bright and sunny and they all looked well dressed. I walked into a meeting with a light bulb hanging down. There was a guy drooling in the corner. I was not impressed, okay? And they were all about 106, Okay. I wanted to tap some of them and tell them they had died, but I was too scared, so I stood in the corner. I didn't hear anything that was said. But during the meeting, I'm running the wheels, I knew darn good and well I wasn't staying in this program. Maybe when I was 104, I'd come back, but not this year, I wanted to, have some fun, which is another interesting thing altogether, I'd been throwing up, I had no friends. I was living in the bottom story of a 3-story house in a one room where lizards, literally, we're talking about reptiles, came in under the carpet because it was very moist down there. The rent was right, $25 a month, And I'm living down here and somebody mentions AA and I say, what? And give up all this fun I'm having? You gotta be kidding. Look around, I'm having a great time. I was doing nothing, it's insanity. Anyway, I'm not sure where, oh yes, I'm in this meeting and my wheels are running, I know that I'm in trouble and I'm in a meeting because I'm in trouble. I was not in a meeting to get sober, I was not in a meeting to get better, I was in trouble. I thought it would get some people off my back. So I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm figuring what I'm going to do when these people pick me back up, and I've got to have a plan. They're going to say, how was the meeting? And I don't want to say, well, it's awful and I'm drinking again, but you got to work out something else. So I decided that I would just smoke dope. Eat a few chocolate chip cookies. I never beat anybody up on dope. Why not? And that was my plan. And again, this is not Narcotics Anonymous, but the reason I tell this story is because this was my period of social drinking. And I left there and told them that, and these poor Al-Anons, shook their heads and said, well, whatever, let go with love, huh? And what happened to me during this period of time when I was not drinking, white-knuckling it, and smoking a lot of marijuana, which I never liked. Who understands that, I heard this thing yesterday in the hotel room. I turned on the TV and it was a Bill Cosby skit. And he was, I don't know if any of you caught that yesterday. Probably the speakers were up in our rooms watching TV. Oh my God. He was hysterical. He did a bit on drugs, and he said, and he was talking, and alcohol, and he was talking to people one day about why they did that. You know, why people got drunk, why people took all these drugs, and this one guy said, must have been an alcoholic, turned to him and said, I do this because it enhances my personality. He looked back at them and says, what if you're an asshole? That's what it was like. If you want to know what it was like, that's my whole story, and I thought that is perfect. We think it enhances our personalities, and we're assholes, you know? Leave it to Bill Cosby. I stole his line. But anyway, so I used this other chemical. It doesn't matter what it is. It was mine. I used it exactly like I used alcohol. I had to have it for everything. I remember one time driving to the beach. I got sober in Marin County, California. We were on our way to the beach, and I said, no, we've got to go home. I've got to go back home. I've got to get my stuff. I can't go have a good time at the beach without my stuff. And I used it that way. And what happened one night was that I went out, and it'd been 3 weeks, I don't know. It was anywhere between 3 or 6 weeks that I didn't have a drink, and I can't tell you how long because it wasn't sobriety, it was dryness, and I was doing a lot of drugs. But I thought this is going to prove it once and for all. You know, by the way, social drinkers never have to prove that. Have you ever known a social drinker who had to do that? They're the ones who say, no, thank you, I'm not thirsty. They don't care. They don't think about alcohol. I mean, I had to prove that I wasn't addicted. So I'm doing this business, and one night this gentleman asked me out to dinner. We were having some Mexican food, and he knew I wasn't drinking, and he said, well, you've been doing pretty good. You've gone X amount of time or whatever. How about a beer? And I said, a beer. Okay, a beer. Good deal. I had one Dos Equis. It was the most miserable beer of my life, and I thought, see, no problem here. The next night I had 2, just like Eve's story. The next night I had a 5th of vodka. That is my social drinking, right there, you know. I don't know any other experience with it. Anyway, I started drinking at a relatively early age, and I don't think I was wrapped real tight before I got here. I think that statement that Bill Cosby made probably is more profound than I know, because my problems, I think, the big book says it. Why not say that? It says in there somewhere that we think a man is unthinking to think that stopping drinking is enough. He's like the guy who comes out of the storm cellar, or the gal who comes out of the storm cellar and says, gee ma, ain't it grand, the wind stopped blowing. If you're an asshole when you drink and you stop drinking, you are an asshole when you're sober. Come on. I'm a bigger one when I'm sober without a program. I'm one of those people who contend I have been more dangerous, and if this frightens you, I'm sorry, but I've been more dangerous in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous without a program than I ever was drinking, because my self-will run riot can be carried out. You know, when I was drinking, and I would think, well, I'm going to get that so-and-so, and as soon as I finish this beer, you know, have another beer, and, you know, by the time you're going to get that person, you're on your hands and knees, and you can't do a whole lot of harm. Sober, I mean, I always thought this was very interesting when I got to my 9th step. Most of my amends in Alcoholics Anonymous were to people in Alcoholics Anonymous. There are a few that I hurt in sobriety, you know, in drinking, but really I had wreaked a lot of havoc in my sobriety, and I can without this program. I do think that we are unthinking. I think one of the biggest disservices we do to people, or I've heard done to people, is to say, all you've got to do is put the plug in the jug and keep coming back. Yes, you do have to do that before you can do anything else. 1 step out of 12 has the word alcohol in it. 1. And I don't know why it took me so many years in this program of fighting, you know, every other way to get well, rather than the way that was laid out. I really believe now, and I don't know what's happened at 10 years. We were talking about that. I feel like it's the simplicity of the program has just showered on me like never before. It's like, my God, you know. Those of us who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give ourselves to this program. This one, you know, and that it uses words like, this is precisely what we did. And I don't know why, you know. I came to AA and said, yeah, but. My sponsor said, I'm going to get you a shirt that says, yeah, but on it. That was my answer to, yeah, but my case is just a little left of center, you see. And I put myself through years of pain. Because, you know, and I also heard someone say, people don't die from the disease of alcoholism here. They die from being unique. You bury a lot of people here who were just different. They just a little different, a little left of center, you know. They didn't need to do precisely what was laid out. I don't know, I'm just really impressed with the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, having been involved with some other groups and other kinds of activities at work and things. Think about it, these were 100 men and women who got together and agreed. Try to get 100 people to agree on anything. The time, no, I've got 29 minutes past 10. What do you know, people can't, 100 people agreed on precisely the way out of this snake pit. You know, exactly how they got out. And I looked at it and said, yeah, but, you know, I think I'll take some vitamin B and jog. Oh, that's insanity, you know? I mean, why? I have this vision lately of being really thrown in this snake pit, even in sobriety, or having some situation that's come up, and I'm down there with rattlers all around me. And I'm screaming for help. Help me, help me, help me. And some sober AA with a lot of time walks by and looks down and says, yeah, I've been in that particular snake pit. I'm going to tell you how to get out. And I say, oh, good, good, I'm so willing, good. And they throw me down this rope, and the rope dangles down, and I can grab onto it, and I look at it and say, well, that's not exactly what I had in mind. I wanted another rope, or, I thought maybe you'd put an escalator. I mean, what is that but insanity? I've had a lot of insanity in my sobriety in that level, a lot of resistance to this simple program. And I know it's important, and I like to tell this story, as sad as it is, because it brings my point home. I was, in my early sobriety, there was a young man who came into AA, and he didn't have a sponsor, and he wasn't working the steps. He was coming to meetings, and every time you asked him how he was fine, with his teeth gritted. Nobody is fine in their first 30 days of sobriety. I wasn't. I mean, at least they have one little problem that's bothering them. Maybe it's that they like to have about a gallon of booze. I don't know, but there's usually something going on. This guy was always fine. He was just fine. And he was around the program, and nobody could get him to open up. And, he'd come to meetings and, come late and leave early, and you'd run out to catch him. And how are you doing? Fine. Boy, I couldn't be better. He's like, the book talks about that, too. We're like the boy whistling in the dark. And the guy sat in his car one night, no drugs, no alcohol, no altering mind chemicals, and he slit his wrists, and he's dead, because he was fine in Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard a man one time say it would be so much more honest if people got up at meetings and said, I just can't take it anymore! He said, then we have something to work with, Then you can run up and say, I've been there, I've been there. Here's how I walked out. Put your feet where mine were, As my sponsor always says to me today, you go try that, Nancy, what I've done there, and if it doesn't work, please come back and tell me. And I keep waiting for something he has done that doesn't work. I haven't found it yet. We don't always agree on politics or the world or language or a lot of things, but everything he has done sober that I am going through, that I have tried, has worked. If this program was about, self-help, at the door, I guess they'd hire people that would hand you a big book and say, never come back. Go home and get well now. It's not what people say. They say, keep coming back because we need you, because you need us, because this is a program of recovery that's started with Bill, and Bob, one drunk talking to another. And that's the miracle. And that's the thing my head will constantly tell me I don't need. It's amazing to me. When I first came into AA, my very first sponsor said, Nancy, everything you know is wrong. I was very insulted. I had been to college. I had a degree in behavioral science. If I'm really honest with you, on my degree it should say, Nancy has a degree in self-obsession. That's what the classes were. Wouldn't they just figure I'd major in it? I'd like to major in self-obsession. I should. It's my specialty. Classes on journal writing and classes on, getting in touch with your innermost feelings. And this program says, share it. Give it away. Give it away. If you're having a problem, when all else fails, work with another alcoholic. Don't go home and take a personal moral inventory. Yes, there's a place for that. But when all else fails, get your butt off the couch. I'm so glad to have breakfast with you. We were both agreeing to the speakers, sitting alone in a restaurant. It was like dynamite. You could hear him thinking about what we're going to say, And I thought, God, I was so grateful that you walked over and took my mind off it. That is how it works. But he did tell me that everything I knew was wrong, and I said, that's not true. I know a lot of things. And he said, oh, yeah? Like what? What do you know about living sober? I knew nothing. Everything that I had, my very best thinking, my very best shot at life, got me to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not even the last thing on my list I ever wanted to be when I grew up. I'd like to be an AA. Who cared? I just didn't know. My way didn't work, and that is constantly revealed to me in this program, to give up, surrender, surrender. You don't know. Your way doesn't work. Try somebody else's. At least be willing to try it. I don't know why I have, maybe you cannot relate to that, so much resistance to trying somebody else's way. I also have a big problem with confusing surrender with defeat. I see a problem coming, and I start doing like a bull, and I charge it, and I punch it, and I go around it, and I go under it, and I attack it, and I pull it apart, and then when I'm lying in a puddle of sweat and confusion and frustration, I say, okay, I surrender. My sponsor says, no, honey, that's defeat. Surrender is when you see something on the horizon that you don't know how to handle, and you put your hands in your pockets, and you say, God, help me. I don't know what to do with that. And you call somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous with more sobriety than you and say, have you ever had that thing on the horizon? Have you ever? That's surrender, and I'm learning about that. It sure saves a lot of energy. But I, anyway, left this meeting and drank again. That was in April of 75. It was not my first meeting. As I told you, it's in July. And I drank, and nothing spectacular happened to me. My life got smaller, and that's always what happened to me with drinking, is that from the moment I started drinking, I drank to get different. And my world got smaller. The friends that I had started disappearing. They didn't want to be around me, to the point where I ended up in this room in Marin County because I thought, gee, Fresno makes me drink. My family's in Fresno, this ugly town. If I get away to this land of fruit, nuts, and sunshine and bean sprouts, and maybe I'll feel better, you know. And I ended up in this house, as I told you, with the snakes under the floor. Actually, I was on the top floor first, but I kept falling down the stairs. So it was very fortunate that this room with the snakes opened up, because then me and the snakes could crawl to bed together, you know. But as God would see it in all of his wisdom, that I was rooming 13 people. 2 of the people in the house were recovering Al-Anons, and one of them was an alcoholism family counselor. Hated him. Just hated him. You know, they were the first, I told you, the first people who didn't say, gee, that's too bad. I'm really going to spare you all the stuff because I don't think it's all that important, really. I almost don't like to dwell on it too much, but I mean, there were scrapes with the law, there were fights, there were things in my behavior that I just couldn't believe I was doing. I couldn't believe it. I know drinking was no longer a choice for me. And I don't know how that happened or when it happened. There was no invisible line. It's just I'm an alcoholic. I don't understand it to this day. But my life at this time consisted of taking about a handful of pills in the morning, and I would go do what I needed to do, and I would come home and I would start drinking. I was, I guess, what they call today a maintenance drinker. I could drink most of the boys I knew under the table, drove them home a lot. Except for one time I went to a party. It was a really frightening thing, and they had one of those little, I called them frou-frou punches. Who wanted to drink that stuff? You know, little Hawaiian punch, a little this, a little that, a little fruit and a flower, and I don't know. And somebody poured me a glass of that, and I drank part of it, and I went into a blackout. That was the first time that had ever happened. I really thought I had control over alcohol because I could take a fifth and still drive and talk, and sometimes, except times I didn't remember, but then, you know, those don't count. But that really scared me that happened, and I was starting to have a lot of scary experiences like that, of coming to. We were talking about that over breakfast. In the news recently where I live, a man just, you know, hit somebody, not an unusual event, killed a couple and their unborn baby. He was drunk, and, you know, a lot of people were really angry, and I had such compassion and sympathy because I know the guy doesn't remember it. I know he's got a disease. It's called alcoholism. It's not to say it's right, but I mean, I just feel so blessed that I didn't do that, because I sure should have. There's no reason when you're driving and you come to on Highway 101 at the Golden Gate Bridge and you don't have any recollection of that distance. Why? I don't know why. I just really feel awfully blessed about it, and that's why I'm here today. Whenever anybody asks me to come and share my experience, strength, and hope, I do, no matter, because I think that's really important. Anyway, so I was living in this house, and that's where my life had come to, and here I am out of my town, away from my drunk mother, and, you know, it's been years since my brother died, and by the way, my brother died at the age of 18 from an overdose of drugs. So when people say to me, gee, as you said, I've spilled more, you know, than you've drank, I mean, I remember that story. He was 18. You know, it doesn't matter what age it is when you get here. You get here just in time, the lucky ones. He didn't have another chance. He never had a chance to even go to Alcoholics Anonymous. They put him in and out of institutions, and I often feel like that was a blessing for me to watch, you know. And now I really have an understanding about, he was 4 years older than I, and that I didn't have then. I just thought the guy was nuts. He was suffering from the same disease that I have, you know, alcoholism. He didn't know it. Anyway, so here I am in beautiful Marin County, and I've got bean sprouts, and I'm a vegetarian now. I'm drinking. I mean, this is the insanity. I love that part in the chapter where it talks about all the things we try. You know, I'm taking vitamins, and I'm a vegetarian, and, you know, I'm playing tennis, and I'm drunk all the time. Not understanding why I'm not getting any better. But I'm watching, you know, the TV, with me and Johnny Carson. There's always about 4 of them spread across the room. And a gallon of cheap rock gut wine, you know, and I'm thinking, God, what's the matter with this picture? You know, what's the matter here? Things aren't getting any better. My life just became smaller and smaller. I was attending school, studying self-centeredness, and being sent a check. My dad was sending me money. I think now it was just like, yeah, you stay there, and, you know, I'll keep sending these checks. Poor guy. I mean, I think about the things that we put, you know, people through, and I remember passing out one time on a dirt road. I don't remember. I have a recollection of coming to and seeing my father's face, and it was shortly after my brother had drowned, and he looked at me, and it was, you know, and he looked into my eyes, and he cried. And I was so drunk, and so loaded, and so completely incapacitated that I couldn't even respond to him. But it was one of those moments, you know, I don't know if you've ever had those, where you drink to just dull it, and you have these crystal clear emotional moments, where I looked at him and thought, oh my God. And it's so nice, you know, years later. I mean, it did take him a long time. I was 5 years sober. So if you run out there with 55 minutes of sobriety and expect everybody to jump for joy, it didn't happen that way for me. You know, it was a lot of denial there. He didn't even want to hear about Alcoholics Anonymous, and it hurt my feelings in the beginning. But 5 years later, he cried again and told me how eternally grateful he was that his daughter could be somewhere and he didn't worry about her. you know, that I was sober and he knew, you know, and he came around in his time. But it was one of those moments, and I had several of those kind of moments, like I said, you know, with the law and with things that were just below my moral standards, you know, going to bed with people's, you know, lovers and things that I thought I would never do, you know, and I had to drink more to get rid of that, you know, and it was just a vicious circle. And at this time I was living in this room going to school, and I always think it's amusing too when I came to AA. I mean, people told me to listen for the ways that we were the same, and that's the first thing I didn't do. Somebody got up and said, well, I lost a family and my job, and I thought, don't have a family, don't have a job. I don't belong. Truth is, I was unemployable. I mean, it's all right. If you've got money, any college in the United States will take you, especially if you want to study self-centeredness. They don't care. Just keep those checks rolling in, you know. And I thought that it didn't apply to me. I was totally unemployable. I was. And I lived in this house, and I went to my first meeting in April, and I drank from April to July. I don't know what happened at my first meeting, and I think that's always important, too, when, you know, I've been secretaries of meetings, and sometimes you ask somebody to chair and they get up and, oh, you know, there's newcomers there, and you don't like the way the person's chairing the meeting, and oh, damn, I wish they'd said this, and you're out there. I've done that, you know. I wish it was a good meeting. And then I remember, you know, my first meeting, I have no recollection. I don't think it matters what happens in a meeting. I don't know. For me, it didn't. I don't know what happened at the first meeting. I can't tell you anything except for the only woman who talked to me at that meeting had alcohol in her breath. I thought, okay, and this guy's over here rocking and drooling, and there's this light hanging down. I thought, I don't know, man. I was not impressed. But, as they say, I've often heard around AA, you know, you may not stop drinking, but you'll never do it comfortably again. Not after your first meeting, you know, because that was the first time since those Al-Anons told me there was another way to live. I didn't have to live this way, you know, and that must have gotten through to me, because I didn't pick up another enjoyable drink from that, it was Easter Sunday meeting, to when I came back in July. And I think this is an important part of my story too. At this Easter meeting I went to in April, talks a lot, it really speaks to my insanity. It was the first time in 6 years I had gone a day without a drink. You know, I had never thought about that, but I drank every day. I drank every day for 6 years, and I was experiencing withdrawals. These two friends of mine in Al-Anon said, we're going to drive out to the beach, it's Easter Sunday, and I had said, okay, I'm going to get sober, I want to get sober. And the reason I wanted to get sober is because I had really gone against even my drunken moral code. I was in such remorse and guilt, and these were the last two friends in my life. I thought, okay, I'll go to AA. I'll go do that, and maybe these people will get off my back. And they were delighted that I wanted to go to AA, and so they decided they would babysit me and, you know, do the right thing. And I don't know, I felt okay in the morning, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd gone for a little walk, and I got in the car, and I was freezing. It was April, you know, and I had goosebumps, and I was shaking, and they turned around sort of simultaneously and looked in the back seat and said, okay. And I tell this because, you know, maybe you've been there, but really what I want to tell you about is the insanity. I went home, and they wrapped me in a blanket, and The Wizard of Oz is traditionally on TV out in California at Easter time. What a nightmare if you're withdrawing, you know. If you're an Al-Anon and you're with somebody withdrawing, don't turn on the TV, you know. I don't know, Toto was coming out of the screen and around the house, and I was jumping up, and they were trying to feed. And another thing, Al-Anons, don't feed us hot tea. You know, chamomile tea. I scalded myself, and I mean, they were all very loving, but... You know, I don't know. When alcoholics withdrawing, best not to give them anything, you know. That's why they put them in padded cells, I guess. But here I am in this blanket, and they've got the alcoholism unit on the phone, okay? This is an important fact. The alcoholism unit. You know, they don't have Overeaters Anonymous or Vegetarians United or, you know, all of you great Marinites. They've got the alcoholism unit, critical ward on the phone. And they want to take me in, and I'm not going in. I'm not going to any goddamn hospital. Leave me alone. And, this went on, I don't know, till all hours of the night. Finally, they left me, and I went to bed, and I was sweating. The sheets were soaked. I would levitate like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, right out of the bed, you know, and I was just nuts the whole night long. Now, I'm telling you this whole story because the next morning I got up, and I staggered into the hallway, and these two women are there that had been helping me through this thing, and I looked at them and said, God, I guess I had the flu. And I believed it. You know, I believed it. I could not believe that. I mean, there were moments during the night where I thought, gosh, does this really have something to do with my... I couldn't connect it. You know, and I drank again after that. And that's what, I mean, when I came here and I heard about insanity, I thought, oh, I get that. That's that time where I was at that bar and I beat up, you know, 17 people and the cop had me in the arm lock. That was insane. No, that you pour enough of any chemical into somebody, they will act stupid. The insanity is that after I got put in the arm lock and beat all these people up, and I didn't beat anybody up, I got beat up a lot when I was drinking. I had a very smart mouth, and, you know, I used to wear neck braces. The people thought it was like a jewelry and a new style. You know, I always had these... I was in black eyes. My graduation, I came home with no sleeves on my thing, you know. I mean, I was just a wreck. But the insanity is not that. I mean, really, I do believe if you set down a social drinker, if you've seen them and pour booze into them, they'll act stupid. The insanity is that after all that stuff would happen, that I thought the remedy would be the very same thing that made me do the insane thing the night before. That's insane. And that's how I lived my life for years. Anyway, on this time went on from April to July, and I drank. Nothing spectacular happened. I just always wanted to kill myself. It was my favorite form of entertainment in the evening, to write suicide notes and deliver them. God, it was boring. You know, I heard somebody say what it was like was really embarrassing. And I mean, that's how I feel most of the time. What it was like is really embarrassing. But it's true, and since I moved there, these two women moved out. After that meeting, I guess they just decided they weren't even going to be in this 13-people house with me anymore. And they were the only two friends I had left on Earth, really. And they were working their Al-Anon program. They were letting go with love. They'd had it. You know, there was nothing else they could do for me. And this one night in July, I was at the end of my rope. I was at that place the big book talks about. I could not imagine life with drinking, and I couldn't imagine life without drinking. I wanted to die so bad. I wished I'd just evaporate, you know, something. I didn't have the courage. I was one of those people, really, and I've heard it said that I wanted to kill myself, but I was afraid I'd get hurt, you know. I mean, I tried to slit my wrist one night with a tab off a beer. Come on, you know. I had a crease, you know, in my. I think I still have it. I don't know, and it was very ineffective. But that was my extent at suicide. You know, I saved pills, but I mean, I was afraid. I was afraid I really would botch it. I didn't want to go off the Golden Gate Bridge. Everybody did that, right? I wanted to go off the Bolinas Mesa and suffocate in the mud, the mud flats. I don't know. It was nuts. But anyway, so these people had moved, and I had called and told them that I was going to kill myself, and they were really working their program. They said, well, if that's what you want to do, okay, but you know, if you want this to get better, you could call Alcoholics Anonymous. And they hung up. And I thought, well, they didn't hear me correctly. I'm going to call them again and tell them that I'm really going to off myself because I can't, you know, it all sounds funny now, but you have to understand the grimness in my life. And I called them back again, and they said the same thing and hung up. And I called them back again, and they'd taken the phone off the hook, and now I'm mad. I'm really mad. And so I poured a peanut butter jar full of vodka, which is what I carried in the car. And I forget these things if you're new. I think it's really important for me to remember things I take for granted, like that I thought that a can between my knees operated a car. You know, I couldn't drive without that, you know, and I used to have to buy Canada Dry sodas and stuff when I was early sober. Couldn't drive in a vehicle without something. That went away, but if you're in that stage, I mean, I just think those little things are important to remember. They were for me, and that people told me, well, if you can't drive without that, go get some Coke or something, you know. But anyway, I had taken to carrying around a vodka jar full of, with peanut butter jar full of vodka in it. I don't know why a peanut butter jar. I guess it held more, and it was kind of sturdy. If it fell, it just bounced or something. I don't know. And I filled this up, and I drove over to the house, and they said something really wonderful to me. I knocked on the door to get some sympathy, and they said, if you don't get off our porch, we're going to call the police. My first sponsor told me sympathy fell in the dictionary between syphilis and suicide. And he didn't want anything to do with either of them. So I didn't get much sympathy in Alcoholics Anonymous, never have, and I'm glad for that. I've gotten a lot of empathy and a lot of courage and strength and hope, but I've never gotten much sympathy. It doesn't work very well. Anyway, I sat on their porch and I thought I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to have to go back to AA. And I mean, it sounds today so ludicrous, but at that time, I couldn't decide. It was kind of like how I felt about AA. I thought, God, I just don't know what to do, you know? So I opted for killing myself, and I got in the car. I guess I went into a blackout because I came to on the freeway, Highway 101, going toward the Golden Gate Bridge, and I looked to my right, and it was actually true. I didn't know it at the time, but there was this enormous hotel fire. So all of 101, the stretch for about 3 miles, is on fire. And I'm coming to out of a blackout, and I thought, oh, God, I did it. Oh, no. So I was really scared. And I don't remember much about that evening, except for I made it back to a crisis unit, and I'm really grateful for I don't know, this woman is, her husband had gotten sober with Bill Wilson, the other Bill Wilson. She was a little old lady, and she was about 4'5", very short, and she ran a crisis center. And I should have mentioned before that this particular crisis center, I went to therapy while I was in drinking, because I thought maybe they could get to the root of my dead brother, drunk mother, and really, they were Al-Anons too. This shrinks it. I hear people that got thrown out of bars, they got thrown out of nightclubs, they got thrown out of golf courses. Not me, I got thrown out of therapy. Somebody I'm paying throws me out, you know, and that was one of my bottoming out points. But I went back to this place, and this little woman talk to me. Oh, she was so exuberant. Her husband had passed away, but I guess he died with 30 some odd years of sobriety, and she had been in Al-Anon all that time, and she kept talking about Dr. Bob and the good old timers and oh, how much fun. I thought, oh, God. And she gave me orange juice, and she gave me a telephone number. And knowing I was 19, I got sober when I was 19 years old, and she gave me the number of somebody who was real active with the young people's groups out there in Marin County in San Francisco. I don't remember much about the evening except I came to in the morning, as I generally did, half on the bed, half on the floor, with my clothes on, all messed up, not wondering about the car, if there was blood on it, you know, et cetera, all that good stuff, and I'd had it. I don't know what happened that morning, but I looked at the number, it was right there in my hand. You know, after all I'd been through that night, and I just dialed it. I didn't do anything else. I dialed it, and this guy got on the phone, and he said, there's a meeting tonight in San Francisco. It's the young people's meeting. It's at Grace Cathedral. Can you be there? And I said yes, and I had a babysitting job, and I canceled it, and I had some man take me to this meeting that was not in AA. And I always think it's amazing, too, that there are people that we hang out with in our drinking that really don't know we have a problem, which was very hard for me. This guy and I hung around a lot together, and he was very adamant about my not being an alcoholic. But he took me anyway. And because I couldn't drive, I was scared of everything and everybody. And he drove me over there, and again, here it is in Grace Cathedral, okay? I mean, Mary is on the wall and stuff, you know? Very ornate. And I needless to say, came in here a rather devout atheist. And I looked around and thought, oh boy. But it didn't matter. I thought, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter. I didn't care. And when they started to talk, a young woman got up and she told my story. I mean, almost to the letter, you know, complete with she had tried other drugs. And I thought, I'm home. I'm home. And we said the Lord's Prayer, and I didn't care about that. I didn't care about anything. I just, you know, for the first time in my life, this meeting has about this many people in it in San Francisco. Regular meetings do. And they asked if there were any newcomers, and this guy that had told me to meet him there nudged me. He became my first sponsor. Put your hand up. You know, I love newcomers when they come in here willing. You know, I was like that. I was just dumb and willing. It was like, yeah, okay. You know. I was willing to go to any lengths. I did not want to die. I did not want to feel the way I felt. I did not want to go on another day like that. You know, it's not so scary to me. People say, you know, well, if I ever drink again, you know, I'll just kill myself. And I had somebody say to me one time, if you ever drink again, kid, you may forget to kill yourself. You did before. That's frightening. You know, to go on day in and day out with those, you know, those kind of things. And I put my hand up and I said, my name is Nancy and I'm an alcoholic, and this entire room said, hi, Nancy. And in California, they're all pep girls and boys, you know. Yay! And they were clapping and everybody was, and I thought, my God, you know, people had been saying, don't come back. These people said, keep coming back. And this guy circled meetings for me, and I just felt like, you know, I was scared to death. I was scared to death of everything, but I felt like I had found my place, and I kept coming back, and I did what I was told to do. We went to lots of meetings. He took me around San Francisco. He introduced me to young people. I got real involved with the young people's group. And what's really amazing to me, too, is that as opposed to being around the program, they encouraged me to be in the program. They encouraged me to pick up chairs, and if they needed a coffee maker, to volunteer, and all that stuff that you think is so important, you know. And they give you money, and you go get styrofoam cups, and you fight about whether to have decaf or how to spend your money, which way to face the chairs. And we used to have these roaring steering committee meetings, just insane kind of stuff. But what's amazing to me is these people I got sober with over 10 years ago in Marin County. We were all young people then. I just turned the big 3-0. I almost don't qualify anymore, but yeah, I know it's sad, huh? I'm talking to the wrong crowd, I can tell. Okay, cancel that one. I thought it was pretty traumatic to me. Anyway, what's amazing to me is that we're all still sober. The people that fought about whether to get bananas and granola or coffee and cigarettes, which way to face the chairs, what time to close the meeting, we all are sober. Some of them live in Arkansas, some are in Oregon, I'm in New Mexico, and it's all amazing to me, but get involved with the program. Get involved with it. Don't come into meetings. Don't go to meetings. Don't be a meeting goer. I was just always been encouraged to do that. And I've done some service work that didn't work out for me too well. I used to go to San Quentin, and I won't do that again, but I am involved with another area of service. I didn't like that much, but there's something for everybody. But do get involved with the fellowship. It's somewhere it says here, it's an experience you must not miss. Working with other alcoholics is the bright spot of my life. It is, you know. I never would have dreamt that. Something happened to me in about 9 months of sobriety that I also think is worth mentioning, and that is that I got well before I got better. And people cautioned me about that. But here my face, you know, went down. First thing that happened, you know, is the bloating went down. I could hold a coffee cup, and, you know, I felt pretty good. And I thought, God, I got to go do some things. Got to make up for all this lost time. So I got together my little backpack and went back to school to study psychology. No program. I mean, I'd been to lots of meetings, and I'd had enough meetings to know that, you know, there was something out. But I just didn't. I was going to get to that later. I had to get my life together. Then I'd come back and work the steps, and it doesn't work that way. And that was pointed out to me too. I don't know why I hear when I hear. Sometimes I don't hear things for years. I don't know about you. I mean, years can go by and I just don't hear it. But it says it in the big book that we have to straighten out spiritually first. Then we straighten out mentally and physically. And I had it all backwards. I was going to be a vegetarian, exercise, get my life together, then I'd come back and work on my spiritual life. And just half measures avail us nothing. My sponsor told me that. They do not avail you a half measure. You don't get zip with a half measure. Nothing. And I have gone for half measures a lot in sobriety. Anyway, at 9 months, I was back in school. I was coming to meetings. People were saying, "How are you?" I was saying, "Fine, fine, just fine. Everything's fine." You know, and I learned right away. I think, too, if you put, I've heard it said, if you put alcoholics in a room full of astronauts, we'll learn to speak astronaut in 3 seconds, It's like, yes, you take the cylinder of the, we're all like, I can do that. I can pick up the language, and I could sit in a meeting, and I could figure out who it was you admired, and I could mimic him or her at meetings. Yes, I was just breezing through the big book on page 86, and I'd quote something, and people were shaking their heads. They know you can't con people in Alcoholics Anonymous, and They really encouraged me not to do that, but I did it anyway. And at 9 months of sobriety, I didn't have a sponsor. I had a sponsor. People kept saying, "Get a sponsor." So I got somebody who was more shy than I was at that time. And we didn't call each other, of course. But when people said, "Do you have a sponsor?" I could say, "Yes, I do." And then finally somebody got smart and said, "Are you talking to her?" Because you sound crazy. Thank God for those people who have the courage to say, "You are nuts," really, I wasn't, and at 9 months I wanted to kill myself again in the fellowship, the happy little fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I wasn't telling anybody, couldn't tell anybody. It's the first thing my head tells me, and I get back to that point. God, of my understanding today, speaks through people. That's the biggest tool my God has, and that is the first thing my alcoholic mind tells me when I'm having a problem. Shh, go home, we'll work it out. You and me, we'll work it out. Don't tell anybody. I mean, and that's the insanity, because if I don't tell you, I'm going to die. I've heard it said that we are as sick as our secrets, and the thing today is true for me, that nothing is more dangerous in my life than the current secret. And I have no secrets today. I mean, it doesn't matter to me what you know about me. Nothing can hurt me, today. And it hasn't always been that way. But at 9 months, it was one of those turning points again. It says somewhere we stood at the turning point, we asked God's protection and care, and I don't think that means the day we walk into AA. For me, it hasn't meant that. I've stood at lots of turning points in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I stood at a turning point knowing that I was going to die or go on this way, worse, or I was going to have to get a sponsor. Once again, I was going to have to do what all of you did before me. I wasn't different. I needed to get with somebody. I had this great misconception that you hear so much in the program about things when you're new. I know for me it was so foreign, the big book. I thought, my God, what's that? I thought they were going to wheel it in on a cart, and there's the big book. Now, if you'll all line up and touch it as I thought, the big book. I mean, and we just throw these words around, sponsor. I thought, sponsor, isn't that the guy who puts the letter on your baseball uniform? I mean, what is that? And steps. And I mean, I got sober in a club where the steps hung on the wall. And honest to God, I mean, it sounds funny, but this is the way I thought. People say, you got to take the steps. Okay. So I'd sit in the meeting, and there's a big, poster of these steps, and I'd say, 1, true. 2, false. 3, never. 4, forget it. And I figure when I do this every time, I say, okay, I took the steps. It's a test, right? True or false? I kept waiting for the day where I'd pass 7 out of 12 like in school, and then you'd pass the steps, I didn't know what that meant. I thought if you agreed with it, you'd taken that step. Okay, 1, I've taken 1. I agree with that, boy. That's really true. And anyway, I just think sponsorship for me, and I guess they talk about it a lot in this program, so maybe for all of us, I don't know, but sponsorship is the touchstone of my recovery. There's nowhere in the book where it uses the word I. It doesn't ever say, take these steps, go home, go in your closet, get well, and come back to meetings and tell us how you did. We share our experience, strength, and hope. We recover together. And I had to sit with a woman in AA and say, how did you take step 1? What's step 1? And she had to show me where it was in the big book. It's not just that line on the wall. There's a whole thing about the step 1. It's in a chapter. And I remember even saying to her when I finally got this sponsor at 9 months, I said, well, my big secret was I didn't think I was an alcoholic anymore. I thought, well, maybe all that was just a bad virus. I don't know what I thought, but I said to her, she was a jeweler, and she was pounding out jewelry this one day, and I said, this was the big thing, she went to see my sponsor, and I said, well, I have something I need to tell you. I don't think I'm an alcoholic. She didn't even look up. She just went right on tapping this jewelry out, And then she said, well, drink. She went right on tapping, and I want to tell you, the fear started in my big toe. And it spread up through, my face turned red, I started to perspire, and my hands started to shake. Now, I've got 9 months in the program, and I'm acting like I've just had a drink. And she looked over at me and smiled, and she said, "Are you scared?" I said, "Yeah, I am." And she said, "My first sponsor did that to me." She said, "Your goddamn body is smarter than your head. Don't listen to your head anymore. It's out to kill you, you know? It's out to kill you. That's the first thing you got to know. You cannot fix a sick mind with a sick mind." That's another great misconception. I have a problem. I'd run out of a meeting at the end of the meeting because I had to go home and work on my problem. What is that? My head is the problem. You go home from, have you ever done that? You go home from a meeting and slam the door and think, "Okay, I'm going to work this out." And pretty soon you're perspiring and your hands are shaking. And everybody else is at Denny's laughing and eating hot fudge sundaes, not you. I'm home working on my problem. God. I am the problem. I am the problem. But it's taken me a long time to get that. I also want to touch just a little bit on what's happened to me recently because it's just been so miraculous. I also came into this program, as I told you, very adamant about God. I'm one of those people, it's just weird. Maybe you can relate. I believed in astrology, ghosts, ESP, you name it, you know, Halley's Comet and the influence of, you know, terrestrial beings. And somebody said God, and I said, "There's no God." I was just, you know, a closed case, you know, and I got beat into a state of reasonableness. I know there are people who have come into this program and they have fallen on their knees and they've taken the first 3 steps within the first week of sobriety. That was not my case. I had to get beat into a state of reasonableness in sobriety. And I did. I mean, I came to believe in a power greater than myself here, and it was a slow, gradual process. And I think it's so important to remember those ABCs for me. God, I love them. They say something in there about, you know, A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, B, that probably no human power can relieve ourselves. Well, it talks before that about that our adventures before and after made clear these 3 pertinent ideas. I mean, to me, most of my, and I love the word adventures, because it's been nothing but an adventure in sobriety. And if somebody had said that to me, which they did in my early sobriety, some woman like Eve came over to me and said, "Honey, you're about to embark on the most fascinating adventure of your life." And I thought, you know, I hated those kind of people. How many of these meetings do I have to go to? You have to go to, you like them. It's the kind of answers I got, you know. I still get those kind of answers. I love it today. But anyway, I came in very closed-minded, and people just kept saying, "Try to keep an open mind, you know, try to keep an open mind." And I went to meetings, and I was pretty adamant about it, you know. I don't want to talk about God, you know, and I was really belligerent and, you know, weird. And they told me to be open-minded, and what a funny thing happened to me. In my early sobriety, I don't know if you had this experience either, but I did. I didn't sleep when I sobered up. I don't know, years. I was just on downers, I guess. Just alcohol is a depressant, I suppose, what I've heard. But all of a sudden, I come home from meetings. This is the other thing, and I'd never could tell anybody this. Now, 10 years later, I'm telling people this because I think might be somebody out there who does the same thing. After the meeting, we'd go to Denny's, they'd shove me in a booth, we'd all laugh, eat hot fudge sundaes, everybody go home, they'd drop me off, and I would be there, you know, my early sobriety. I'd walk in the house, turn on the TV, turn on the radio, the blender, the iron, you know, and stand in the middle of my room and think about writing poetry. I mean, I didn't know what to do with myself, and I thought, what do other people do after meetings? I wasn't sleeping, and it was starting to get to me. It was about 30 days before I had a wink of sleep in the fellowship, and they say, so sympathetic here, "I'm not sleeping." Well, nobody ever died of lack of sleep. Just keep coming back. I'll be the first. God damn it, I'll be the first. I'll show you. I started to feel fried, you know, like my nerves were just like, ee. So one night I said this to this guy, and he walked over to me, and he said, "Why don't you pray about it?" And I thought, I hate these people, you know? These are the kind of answers they give you. I can't sleep. I think I want a Quaalude. What do you mean pray about it? Give me some Valium, you know? What do you take? And they weren't taking anything, and they were praying. And this was my first prayer, you know? So no matter how inadequate, you know, it seems, this was my beginning. I came home that night, and I thought, pray. Okay, I'll try it. And then it went something like, "I don't even believe that you're there. I don't care if you're there." I feel ridiculous talking to myself, by the way. I mean, it's so cool, you know, my hands in my pockets, and I'm looking around, and in case anybody's watching, I want to be cool at all times. You know, God forbid anybody see you humble yourself in front of a, you know. So weird. We can puke on people's white carpets, but pray in front of you? No way, you know, I'm cool. And I said this little deal, you know, "I don't believe you're there, but man, I hadn't had any sleep for 30 days. I'm going crazy." I slept. Boom, I was out. And I woke up, and that was my first spiritual experience, really. I thought, wow, there's something to this. You know, I went to sleep. And for me, it's been a process of, you know, that higher power becoming a personal friend of mine, you know, and that's something that It just happens here. I don't know how it happens, except for that it's in the adventures of my life that I can look back on. I think I mentioned to you when I came in here, I was studying. I had a degree in self-obsession, and my sponsor suggested that I get a job. I had no skills, you know. I was in college, and I thought being in college meant I didn't have to work or something, which was true. I didn't. And he said, no, I think you should get a job. Why don't you go get a job washing dishes? I thought, washing dishes? Is this guy kidding, you know? And I did. It was all I could handle. It was really all I could handle, and it was perfect. It kept my hands busy, and we didn't have dishwashers. I was the dishwasher, you know, one at a time. And I got a paycheck, and I got to eat a hamburger for free, and one time, the day the cook broke his arm, and I moved into the cooking profession, and it was one of those Hollywood stories, you know, out of the dishwasher into the cook, and I learned but that's God working in my life, you know. I learned the chefing profession, and I loved it for years. It was a skill that I just really loved, and I was mentioning to George today at breakfast that I moved to Taos. I got sober in Marin County, lived there for, 5 years, and it was the World Conference in New Orleans, and I was getting a little tired of Marin County and wanted to move somewhere else. Wanted to move to a more rural area, and I was driving out to New Orleans, and where I'd never been, and someone said, stop by Taos, and if you're thinking about moving somewhere rural, and I thought, I don't want to live in the desert. You know, my mind doesn't know anything. These days, I just don't know where I'm going to be. I really feel like this, you know, my higher power moves me where I'm needed. I don't know where that is, and it is an adventure. Every day is an adventure. And I used to have, people told me in my early sobriety, if you made a list right now of all the things that you would like to fantasize about having happen to you in your life, you would just cut yourself far short. You know, I didn't believe it then, but boy, I can look back on it now and things that I could not, the best I could think of doing for myself someday was living in the country and owning my own little restaurant. Sounds pretty good still, it's okay, you know, but that was the very best fantasy I could come up with. Have a little money, live out in the country, have a garden, and that's not at all what I'm doing today. I'm doing something I have no skills in. But I moved to Taos, and I also should mention, too, that at about 8 years of sobriety, I had just broken up out of about the 4th relationship in my sobriety. I was pretty distressed about that. I think, too, it's really important to mention these things. I was on unemployment for the 3rd time in Taos County. I'd been there 5 years. Relationship had just gone down the drain. I was so depressed I couldn't sleep in my bed. 8 years. I'm coming up on my 8th birthday, and I'm sleeping on a concrete floor in my living room because I just can't get in bed. I'm too depressed, you know. I'm in the fetal position. Going to meetings, and I'm seeing my sponsor, and I'm thinking, 8 years, there's got to be a new set of instructions. You know, what the hell do you do now? You know, I'm on unemployment. I told my sponsor one day, I said, if I go to the meeting on my birthday and tell my story, people are going to run out for a drink after. They're going to say, if that's what 8 years of sobriety is like, I don't want any part of it. And he said, you speak, you tell your story, you share it. This is, you know, the hope is that you're in this bad place and that you will pass. And it was the thing that's amazing to me, and I mean it, I really believe the tools were laid at my feet my first week of sobriety. They haven't changed. I got up in the morning off the concrete floor at 8 years of sobriety, no job, unemployment, no relationship. Now I've done this several times. I'm really depressed. And I took a shower and cleaned up, even though I knew I would not live till 10 a.m. The same old thing. Nobody ever died from lack of sleep. I thought, people say nobody ever died from too much pain. I thought I'll be the first. I'm just going to evaporate out here. By this time, I should tell you, too, I own a little house out in the country, which is completely unknown to me. I had been managing a restaurant and got fired from it, is what happened. They got the job dissolved. And so I've been fired in sobriety. I'm on unemployment, living out here. And I took a shower and drive out to my sponsor's house. He'd open the door in the morning, and I'd start crying. We'd sit down and have a piece of toast, and we'd talk, and I'd feel better, you know. And I'd go look for work, and I would come back, and I would say to him, I'm doing all the things. I'm going to meetings. I'm talking to my God. I'm working with people in the program. I said, I don't feel good. And he said, honey, when you're at the end of your rope, just tie a knot and hang on. The blessing is right around the corner. And I think this is so important because, again, it has not been my experience, strength, and hope that when I came to AA, I lived happily ever after. I got a chance to do life, which means people I have loved dearly have died. Relationships that I thought would last forever dissolved. Jobs that I wanted to keep didn't happen. But nothing, absolutely nothing has happened in my sobriety or has been removed from my life that has not been replaced with something better. Nothing. And I still know that, but still when something's being ripped out of my hands, that blessing I talked about that's pushing me, pulling me, tugging me forward, I still want to hang on. You know, but even with that experience of knowing nothing's been ripped out of my hands, it has not been put back with something better. So anyway, again, what looked like to me the very worst possible thing that could happen in my life turned out to be the biggest blessing ever. It did pass. You know, it did pass because I did the same things I was told to do my first week of sobriety. The very same things. There are no new set of instructions. That's it. Go to meetings, go to lots of meetings, get involved with the fellowship. I'm very involved with service work in New Mexico, and not always because I want to be, because it's one of those things I was told to do, you know, and it has turned out to just be one of the richest things I could possibly have done. Have a sponsor, use your sponsor, talk to your higher power. I begin to think more and more in my sobriety, it doesn't matter how you feel about something. I mean, you know, people have said to me, why don't you do such and such? And my head says, we don't feel like it. What I feel like doing has very little to do with what I'm supposed to be doing. Do it. Pray. If you don't feel like praying, pray anyway. It doesn't matter how you feel, what you think, what is important. It says over and over in here, this is a program of action. Faith without works is dead. I mean, I love the big book. It can't get much clearer. Faith without works is dead. Half measures availed us nothing. The result is nil until we let go absolutely. I mean, I don't know how you can misconstrue that, but I have. But same set of instructions. And today, I'm living in Santa Fe. And as a result of being unemployed and without a relationship and completely without anything to do, somebody called me and asked me if I wanted to fill in as an overnight DJ, something I had never thought about. Radio? So I work at this station. It's a trailer. It's a trailer at the top, and you have to put on real long songs like We Are the World, so you can go out and go to the bathroom in the sagebrush because there's no toilet. And there's flies, and I mean, I think I found heaven. I think I'm a star up there, the headphones, you know, and lightning strike. Oh, it's up in New Mexico, and it was the only FM station, and the guy that runs it is on dope. And I mean, but I don't care. And yet you get your paycheck, and you don't dare put it in your bank account. You run to Safeway and cash it, and hope that it cashes. And I made the fatal mistake once of putting it in my checking account and writing checks off of it, and having to go around and put all the fires out. But anyway, this is the kind of place I worked for, and I thought, this is great. This is I've arrived, and I got fired from there. I got fired from there for demanding a toilet and a paycheck on time that didn't bounce, okay? And again, here I am, second time now in sobriety I've been fired. I'm not even getting unemployment now because they're suspicious about me, and I think I got fired from a drug addict. I've got, X amount of time in the program, and this son of a gun just fired me. Who's he, And my sponsor said, look, you found radio. God has given you something to do that you had no. People say I love AA because it's the only place I can come and say. People say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm a news director at the #1 station in New Mexico." People say, "Well, God, did you go to school for that?" No. What's your upbringing? I don't have, washing dishes. I don't know. And people in AA understand that, and there's more to that story too. But because when the guy hired me at this station, my sponsor said, "Nancy, you can put on your white jacket, clean up, you get a resume." I said, "A what?" A resume. And so another member of Alcoholics Anonymous helped me write a resume, okay, which is ridiculous to apply for radio. I had 9 months in radio at this place I just told you about, okay, with the flies and the weird, having to go to the bathroom in the stage. And I've been fired from it, no less. This is my resume. But anyway, it looks nice. She typed it really nice for me on a piece of paper, and I got a little briefcase and ran off I had to go to other cities because there was no more radio in Taos, and I went down to Albuquerque and Santa Fe, and somebody in the program turned me on to a woman who ran a television station, and she directed me to this place. She said, well, there's an opening, I know, because I just hired this guy to be my director on the television, so go down there and apply. I said, what is it for? She said, it's news director. I said, I don't even know how to say that. Gorbachev, man. That sounds like somebody sneezed. Bless you. She said, don't worry about it, just go apply. And I thought, okay. So, I think Woody Allen said it. I hate to steal it from him, but it applies to AA. He said something like 90% of life is showing up. That's really all it is, Take a shower, brush your hair, and stand here in front of the podium. I did that this morning. I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to say. But I showed up, so here I am, and it was like that job interview. I got in front of this guy. Had to go back 3 times. I'm telling you, this is the #1 station in the entire state. It's a news director. I have no experience. The guy's got people from Chicago and out of town that are applying for this position, and I'm just there. I'm showing up. And he called me back for the 3rd time, and I sat in front of him and said, we talked for a little while, and he said, well, I'm going to hire you. And he leaned across the desk, and I'd love to tell his name, and he said, and I got to tell you, I have no idea why. Do you love it? I do. I thought, I got some friends who know why. I really do. And he hired me, and I work at the station now, and I do the news, and it's the #1 station. I love it. And again, I need to tell you, this is not, I don't really believe that Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where we find wealth, property, prestige, although those things are fringe benefits. What's more important about this story to me is I didn't think this up. I didn't sit home and say someday I'd like to be a radio announcer and be the news director of a big station. It was a gift. And it was a result, it says somewhere in here, we talk about the promises, you know, it's sort of like when I started off, that our experiences, you know, no matter how far down the scale we've gone, we'll be able to benefit others, you know. It's the same thing. As a result of these steps, it promises us a spiritual awakening. As a result of this program, you know, and so I really, for the first time too, I have been talking to somebody in the program, and I have found myself saying something that we read every night, and I know why now, you know. She has 6 years in the program, and she's where I was at 9 months. She wants to kill herself. She has no program. And I thought, I found the words just come out of my mouth that I've heard over and over and over again. I said, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. It's all here. You know, and I never could understand that when I would come and drop some big problem about a relationship or a finance. It doesn't matter. It says here somewhere that this whole thing, no matter what you think you're doing here, whether you think you're here because the law sent you, whether you think you're here because you drink too much, it says the reason that the thing we're doing here is that we're finding a power greater than ourselves that will solve our problem. Our problem, whatever our problem is. My problem has been alcoholism, it has been relationships, it has been finances, it has been living with other people, you know, my species, which for years I didn't think I was a part of. It's all here. And we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. And again, I mean, to say, you know, my relationship with the power greater than myself and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, they're the most important things in my life. They aren't just the most important, they are my life. You know, and I beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Thank you so much for letting me speak.